Hey guys, Max Rich here, and today I want to talk about how to make your right hand, if you're a finger picker, much more efficient, much more relaxed, quicker, snappier, sharper movements, basically all the things that any finger picker is sort of like looking for. All right. The biggest thing that I see most players doing wrong when they finger pick, well, I see a couple things. And the first one is that the angle of their hand is always pressed against the guitar as though they were like flat picking and palm muting at the same time. If I turn sideways, you see the way I hold the guitar, right? There's a lot of space between my wrist and the top of the guitar, the face of the guitar. A lot of players will finger pick like this, right? Now, I'm out here, and a lot of guys are in here, right? I want you to take a look at the shape of my fingers right here, right? If I'm here, right, the shape of my fingers, I'll lift my hand off so you can see, the shape of my fingers are like that. They're all in a kind of a hook shape, right? Now, if I take that, put it back, and now I go into my position, which I bring my wrist way out, right? Now, you see the shape of my fingers? They're much more elongated, right? So if I take that off, and I hold my hand like that, right? Now I have either this position, which is my position, or this position, which is a lot of other players' positions. Which one of those hands do you think looks more natural, more relaxed? This one or this one? I'm hoping you're going to go with that one, right? Because that's basically what's happening. If I just let my hand hang, right? I have sort of like elongated fingers with a little bit of a curve. They're not like totally straight. They're like slightly curved, right? If I take that position and I keep, this is a completely relaxed hand. I'm using zero muscle energy, right? And you don't want to use muscle energy any more than is necessary to get, you know, the notes out of the guitar that you need. So if I take this relaxed hand and I put it on the guitar, right? That's essentially the shape that I'm playing with, right? I'm playing with a completely relaxed hand, right? So I'm not playing like that, because that is completely unrelaxed, right? And there's a lot of problems with this, right? Number one, if I use this shape, right, I have a longer finger to pluck with as opposed to this. I have a shorter finger to pluck with because I can't move very much because I'm so close to the string. Since I can't move very much, I, number one, don't have a lot of dynamic range because I can't generate enough power, I can't generate enough attack to pluck the string loudly and effectively, right? So that's number one. Number two, I have to use really, really small motions, and I'm very limited. And since my hand is already tight, I have to work to hold my fingers in this position. This is not natural. So I'm already engaging muscle tension in my fingers. And on top of that, now I'm going to start trying to pick real fast, basically compounding muscle tension on top of muscle tension. I'm not going to be able to sustain that for a long period of time. I'm not going to be able to play quick, fast motions with my fingers. I'm not going to be able to engage the fast twitch muscle in my hand if I'm already starting from a tense position. I have to start from a relaxed position. Secondly, after you strike a string, right? So if I strike a string, the idea is not that I end up here with my finger in my hand. The idea is that after I strike a string, I come right back. I come back to a neutral, relaxed position so that I can strike again and do that back and forth using alternate fingerings or whatever finger pattern you're doing. If I'm like this, I strike a string and now I have to return like a very small amount, right? Because I can't move very far, but I'm basically going from like 40% muscle engagement to 60% muscle engagement or 80%, and then back down to 40, right? So I never, at any point during the stroke, I never release the tension from my hand. So every stroke on top of that is adding another layer of tension, right? So that's number one. Number two, when you have a longer finger like this, you actually get a lot more power, not necessarily from the length of the stroke, but from the fact that the point of contact is farther away from the hinge point. You know, if you've ever played like any sport like baseball or something, right? Or I mean, you don't even need to think about it. You can pick up a pencil and do the same thing, right? If you're gonna like hit something with a stick or a baseball bat or a golf club or something, right? The longer the stick or the bat or the club is, the more momentum you're able to generate, right? Because the point of contact, you holding that stick with your hand, the farther the tip of the bat or the tip of the golf club is away from your hand, the more power you're going to generate. Like if you're a golfer, you know that like your driver is physically longer than your 9-iron, right? And the reason is the driver needs to make the ball go farther. And that's the exact same concept. The hinge point right here at my big knuckle is way farther away from the tip of my finger that's making contact. If I'm like this, right, the tip of my finger is making contact and the hinge point is my middle knuckle. It's not my big knuckle. My big knuckle can't even move, right, because I'm like this. I can't even use my big knuckle. So I've shrunken the distance between the fulcrum point, like the hinge point, and the contact point by going like this, which means I can't generate enough power, I can't generate enough momentum to have wide dynamic range. So there's a lot of things wrong with playing like this. And that comes from putting your hand or your wrist on the guitar. People do that because of security, because it makes them feel like they're not going to miss. Like, oh, I'm closer, I'm tighter to the guitar, therefore I won't miss as much. But if you listen to anyone who plays this way, their dynamic range is pretty small and they usually play everything sort of at a monotone type of level, right? That's not what you want. You want to be able to have a wide dynamic range to express musicality. And so in order to do that, go from this position to this position. I mean, look at the distance between the face of the guitar, the top of the guitar, and my wrist. It's quite extreme, right? And the reason it's so big, like once again, if I just let my hand hang, I don't hold it out like that because that's using muscle energy to hold my wrist straight. I let my wrist hang, and that's the exact angle I use on the guitar, right? So that allows me to have a loud dynamic range. I don't even know if the mic will pick up the lowest notes because they're really, really quiet. But that being said, you just have way more control when you have longer fingers, right? You have more power, more volume, all of that. It may not feel like you have a lot of control at the very beginning because you've been used to playing this way with very small strokes, but the more you practice like this, the more control you get, I guarantee it. Look at the best finger players in the world. They're all classical musicians, right? The classical guitarists. Their right hand beats any right hand of any other guitar player out there because of the necessity of being extremely technical when you're playing classical guitar. All of them play like this. None of them play like this. And it's because this is a superior technique. It is just for every reason. So that's the distance you get off of the face of the guitar. The other thing that I see players do that's really like very, very troublesome to me is a lot of players will not play like in this position. They'll play in this position, right? And what happens? Take a look at the shape of my wrist. Right now you can see my wrist and my forearm is kind of bending downward, right? Sort of like concave, right? My position that I play in is like this. Once again, this is this loose, hanging, dead wrist, no energy type of a position. My wrist doesn't naturally sit like this. It sits like that when gravity takes hold, right? So I use that position. When you go like this, it does something other than create muscle tension because once again, I have to work to hold my hand in this position. Naturally, my hand would just fall, right? But I have to use my muscle tension to sit just here, and I haven't even begun playing yet. But other than that, if I go to play my thumb now, right? So I'm going to play my thumb, and then I play my first finger. Now my thumb is stuck in my hand, essentially rendering it useless until I undo my first finger, undo my thumb, and then reposition. That's a lot of steps just to go from a thumb note to a first finger note and back to a thumb note. Right? That's way too much work, right? And the reason that everyone plays this way, who's really competent at finger picking, is because when I play this way, my thumb and first finger can play back to back without running into each other, they pass each other. And a good test to see if you can actually do this is to look for a triangle of empty space. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. There's a triangle. See, it's now real wide. It gets real narrow. The triangle, it's black because of the background right now, but it's a triangle of empty space between my first finger and my thumb. Right? You can have it really small or you can have it really big. But as soon as you have no triangle anymore, now my thumb and first finger are going to be running into each other. See? I don't have a lot of motion. Once again, I have a very small range of motion because my fingers are running into each other. If I separate them with a triangle, that triangle of empty black space right there, they can pass each other with no problem. Right? So that is a huge element because a lot of players end up playing like this, which once again, it may feel relaxed because that's how you flat pick, right? So you're used to being in this position, but it's totally inefficient for finger picking. Get that triangle, right? And make sure that your hand, if you're just loose, letting your hand hang loose, that is the position that you put on the guitar, right? This very steep wrist angle, look at that. It's pretty steep because that's how my wrist hangs, right? My wrist naturally hangs like that. So I put that on there. I have nice elongated fingers, and now I can play comfortably. So, those are two of the biggest things. One of the other things that I see a lot of players do is even if you have all this together, right? You got the proper angle, you got the distance between the top of the guitar and your wrist, you got the triangle, everything is good. One of the things I see players doing is that they tuck their pinky in all the way into the palm of their hand, right? Once again, this is a tight, unrelaxed position. You have to work to hold your finger that way, right? And the muscle that is required to hold your pinky down not only is right here, but it's also in your forearm, right? And the muscles in your forearm, there aren't many of them, right? There's only a couple that make your fingers move. And the one connected to your pinky is also connected to your ring finger. So if you are tight with your pinky, you're necessarily going to be tight and inflexible with your ring finger, right? This one is really, really hard to master, but it takes some time, takes some energy, just like everything else on guitar. Being able to play with your pinky finger, it doesn't have to be totally straight out like this. But it definitely shouldn't be in. It should be somewhere neutral, somewhere relaxed, right? Because once again, if it's straight out, that's also requiring muscle energy. So if I'm playing, I mean, it might move a little when I use my ring finger, but it's still sticking out because it's completely relaxed. It's not tense at all. It's relaxed, right? That is a huge one. That takes a lot of work that you gotta look in the mirror, you gotta watch your pinky all the time. And I would practice with just open string arpeggios. And keeping an eye on your pinky, trying to prevent it from moving or flinching or twitching at all, right? Those three things, the shape of your wrist, the distance of it from the top of the guitar, the triangle, and the pinky will take care of a vast majority of issues with your playing, right? There is, however, one final thing, and this is sort of, this maybe save this one for once you get the hand position and the triangle and everything down, right? But one of the other things you got to do is you've got to plant your finger on the string before you pluck. You don't want to swipe from the air, right? And the reason for that is whether you're using fingernails or you have no nails, it doesn't matter. If you have no nails, it's even harder. Because nails sort of give you extra surface material to work with. But if you're, regardless of whether you're playing with nails or not, if you're swiping from the air, right, as you're playing, there's two problems with that. One is you don't necessarily know when you're going to make contact with the string. You may have an idea roundabout, but you don't know exactly the very millisecond that your finger is going to slice through that string. So it's very hard to predict, and it ends up getting a lot of players to play out of time because they can't predict when their finger is going to actually strike the string to the most precise moment possible, right? So that's number one. Number two is you're always going to be hitting the tip of your finger in a different spot, because it's just virtually impossible to hit the exact same spot swiping from the air every time. That would be like swinging a baseball bat at a baseball and trying to get it in the exact same, spot the size of a quarter on the baseball bat every time. That's virtually impossible, right? It's the same thing. You just can't hit a moving target like that specifically. So when you plant, when you get your finger on the string before you strike, even if it's a millisecond before you strike, if you're really paying attention, there's a small moment of a little staccato rest right before I strike again. I'll kind of exaggerate it. Right? So I'm pushing my finger onto the string, feeling where the correct contact point is, and then striking. Doing it again, and then striking. Doing it again, and then striking. So planting is essential, right? Because you don't want to try hitting a moving target, especially if you're doing it with 3 or 4 fingers, real complex, with all different patterns and fast playing. It's just not going to end well, right? So once again, wrist position, high up off the guitar, elongated fingers give you way more power, way more dynamic range. The triangle prevents your fingers from running into each other, your thumb getting trapped in your hand. The planting is essential, right? All of these things help make you a better guitar player, right? This is not the end of the journey for your right hand. There are a lot more finite details, and we can get into that in another video, but for now, work on these elements, make sure that you can get them comfortably, and sort of a test that I like to use is whatever piece of music you're practicing, don't try playing the whole thing to get this stuff, right? Because then you start concentrating on your left hand, you start concentrating on notes and all this other stuff, and you forget the main focus of your practice, right? But take a small piece of music, 4 measures, 2 measures, something like that, 8 measures, and it doesn't matter about the notes. So who cares about the left hand? Who cares if you're buzzing? Who cares if the tone is wrong? You have to block that out if you're focusing on your right hand. And then the goal is, the pinky, for example, can I play those 4 measures without my pinky moving at all, without it straightening and without it curling in? It may slightly move like a ½ centimeter if I use my ring finger, but that's not that big of a deal. I don't want it curling in, I don't want it super tight straight out, right? So can I play all 4 measures with it like that? And then can I do that 5 times in a row perfectly? If I get to the end of, or halfway through the 5th repetition, and then I notice my pinky curled in, I'm back down at 0 repetitions, because all of this stuff has to become second nature in order for it to work in a real life playing scenario where you're focusing on the notes and the fretboard, you're not watching your right hand, you're listening to the music, playing dynamically, you're doing all this mental work while you're playing. You can't also be concentrating on your technique. That will just never work, right? So the technique has to become automatic, which means you've got to build it in so that it is automatic 5 times out of 5 every single time perfectly, so that when you do concentrate, well, you can trust that the pinky's going to stay there. Same with the triangle, same with the wrist, same with the planting, all of those elements. So give that a try. See, concentrate only on 1 of these at a time. Don't try to concentrate on 4. Start them in the order I gave them to you. So the wrist, the triangle, the pinky, and then the planting. And if you have any issues, any questions, please contact me. And if you like this video, if you enjoy it, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps me doing this. It helps me create content. And if you feel like throwing a small donation my way, I would be much appreciative. It helps me do this stuff for free and helps me keep putting out content so that you guys can learn guitar, go through it a little easier than I went through it, because I had to learn it really the hard way. I had to learn everything myself. I didn't have anyone telling me these tricks for the most part. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you have any questions, please contact me. I'd be happy to help.